All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is having a great Monday morning and the beginning of your week. And so we are here for our webinar today with our friends from the UAB Career Center, and we are delighted to have Dr. Lauren Contant with us today. But before we begin, and as we give people some time to join us here on Zoom and on Facebook, just remember we do have a couple of more webinars coming up. We have Wellness Promotion and UAB Student Counseling Services on Thursday. And of course, we have this wonderful webinar today. It's never too early to start thinking about careers. And so also remember at the end of this webinar, we will have a post-webinar survey. And if you have any questions as we go through our webinar today, please put them in the Q&A section here on Zoom, or you can add them to the Facebook section for comment. And so if you see me turning my head, it's because I'm searching and waiting for some of those questions through the comment section. So without further ado, I think we can get this started. And so Dr. Contant, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Carmen, and hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be able to connect with parent and family members, specifically to share about student employment, but by context about the UAB Career Center. As Carmen has shared, I am the director of the UAB Career Center, and what that means is I get to show up to work every day and help your students connect to their future potential, tap into that potential, and really to be the best job seekers possible when the time comes for them to leverage their UAB academic experience for their next steps. The Career Center exists to serve your students in helping them make sense of their academic learning and talk about it in a way that is employable. We also want to help connect them to the right types of experiences so that when the time comes for them to sit in an interview chair, they have actual experience to draw from. And that's really where the lens of student employment comes into play. We want to ensure that your students not only recognize part-time jobs as a viable way to earn extra money. We know that that's important, right? As we think about the financial expense of college, but we also have data to support that part-time employment is a valuable career experience. And we encourage students to take advantage of that career experience to learn and to develop the appropriate skills they need to be effective job seekers and effective in their future workplaces. So today we're going to talk about earning while you learn, but through the context again of a part-time job and as a mechanism for career readiness. When we talk to our students, and one thing I encourage you to do with them as well is we want them to question the whys. If they're going to engage with something at UAB, they should be questioning how it's supporting them, how it's supporting their UAB experience, perhaps their belonging at UAB, but also how it's supporting their future goals. There's lots of things to get involved in, but typically I see students don't really connect the dots on that a part-time job is actually a vehicle to support their growth, their identity development even, and ultimately their career readiness, but it certainly is. And we see students report gains in confidence, amongst other things we'll talk about here shortly, are related to their working experience. So the first question I typically prompt to students is, why do you want to work? And that opens the door for us to have some conversation around career readiness. We're going to actually lean into that as our starting point as well, so that you can have these conversations with your students, especially if you have a student that maybe is more hesitant to work or only sees work as a paycheck and not as a career builder. When we look at why students should work initially, it really starts with data. I feel like data can back up any suggestion around career readiness, and it's important for us to point that out. Firstly, we know that employers seek experience. What you're seeing on the board here is data from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. Biannually, they do a survey where they ask employers across all industries. So, regardless if your student wants to go into education or nursing or anything in between, regardless of their industry or future professional goals, this survey assesses from employers in those fields, what do you look for in a college graduate? Now, what this helps us do is to pinpoint experiences or concepts students need to focus on during their undergraduate experience and graduate experience, so when they prepare for that industry role, they're ready. That data set points to only 42% of employers are presently screening by the student's GPA. Now, GPA used to be something that if you had a good GPA, you wanted to make sure that that was on your resume because it was used to filter out candidates in a large search pool. What we see now is that it's the baseline that our students are academically excellent, and employers look for additional experiences to supplement their resume to point to skill development that actually makes your student qualified and prepared for that workplace role. 43% of that same data set pointed to part-time employment specifically as something that they look for on your student's resume. Now, that's only 1 percentage point higher than GPA, but it is higher. And what we know beyond that is 81% of those same employers say that they seek industry-specific experiences. That's going to come typically by way of an internship or sometimes a co-op, for example. For your student to be competitive for those industry specific experiences, which is ultimately what those employers seek most, they have to have experience to get them into the roles that they're desiring, like that internship role. And so a part-time job not only looks good for those future employment opportunities full-time, but it also is going to make them more competitive to get into those midway experiences like that industry-facing role as an intern. So part-time work is important. With this data is supported and backed up by the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And if we dig a little bit further, we know that it addresses what we consider to be the skills gap. So what do I mean by skills gap? If you look at the same data set from employers, they rate the importance of specific skill versus the proficiency of a student that has shown up in their workplace as an entry-level employee and how they're utilizing that skill. So we'll see here communication. 96% of employers said that communication is vital in the workplace. And again, this is across all industries. However, they rate students that are coming in as entry-level employees as only 53, or you could round that up to 54% proficient in communication. We see that again with critical thinking as well as leadership. And leadership is an 81% of importance versus 31% of proficiency. When we consider this skills gap, start brainstorming. I encourage you to just think to yourselves right now, what types of experiences could your student get to address this? There are many experiences on this campus that we could start lining up and encouraging your student to engage with, which would all be good experiences, like joining a student organization. That could be a direct connection to leadership, or participating in volunteerism. There's networking and shadowing and certainly skill development through volunteerism. But one that I think is often overlooked is a part-time job. When you think about a part-time job, regardless of that job, you are going to grow your communication skills, for example. You're going to have at a minimum a supervisor you report to. You're going to have to communicate with them, receive feedback, likely verbally, and provide written communication as you work with them in that role beyond the other stakeholders you're going to be working with. We know a part-time work also leverages problem-solving skills, which would address critical thinking gaps. Our students are put in situations that often are not career aligned, and we'll talk about that a bit more, but they're still going to develop the transferable skill of critical thinking. And then lastly, leadership. What's really great about seeing UAB students be successful through part-time work is we get to see them tap into their own leadership potential and really develop that potential through the encouragement of mentorship and supervision. Leadership is something that is a great thing that you can take away or your student can take away from a part-time role that is unexpected, but again, addresses that gap. And so when we think about what's the value of part-time jobs, yes, the value is obviously that paycheck, but it's so much more than that too as it relates to student skills. The next slide I'm going to show you is actually going to line up the skills that employers look for from this last data. So this is the last data I'm going to give you from that data set. I promise I'll move past it shortly, but it's going to put those skills in order of importance. I want you to brainstorm before I show you this slide to think of what do you think that most important skill is? All right, so I want you to think about that for a minute. What's the number one skill you think an employer would be looking for, again, across all industries? Here's the reveal. Teamwork is the number one skill employers are seeking on a candidate's resume. That's followed closely by some of the ones we just talked about, problem solving, communication. My two favorite on this list are actually work ethic and initiative. I personally believe there's no better way for your student to demonstrate work ethic and initiative than by taking on a part-time job while they're a student at UAB, while they're in the academic rigors of the classroom, but committing themselves to supporting the mission of university departments and external organizations through their part-time roles. If we can help students again understand that there's value to this experience beyond a paycheck, and that value comes by way of transferable skills or career readiness skills, is what we typically refer to them as. They're going to be able to not only experience the development of these skills, but hopefully be able to talk about them as well. And that's a way the Career Center can really support them beyond finding the job, is helping them learn to articulate how they talk about this experience through the lens of skills for future employers. Don't take my word for it. And let's not just take the National Association of Colleges and Employers' word as the only piece of this puzzle. We wanted to know from UAB students, what's your experience like serving in a part-time job, either on campus or off campus? So we went to them this past spring during National Student Employment Week. We had a campaign called Good Work. And what it was is we just celebrated the good work of students across campus and in our community serving in part-time roles. As a part of the Good Work campaign, we asked those students to participate in a survey where we could understand what was the value of part-time work for them beyond their paycheck. What we saw our students report is yes, skill development, that career readiness piece was evidence there. But we also saw that 91% of reporting students, which was almost 900 students who took this survey, indicated that they built professional connections. Now, what's the value of professional connections? We all know, right, that old adage, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. As humans, there's some element of truth to that. Helping students understand that is important so that they build their networks and what we call social capital. We're going to help them have exposure to ways to do that. But a part-time job is an incredible way to build their social capital. If a student takes advantage of those connections, what they leave with are future mentors or current mentors, too, in fact. They leave with references. They leave with peers who are going to recommend them for future opportunities. We also saw students report a gain in confidence post part-time work, which was really interesting. We've asked students, what did you mean by confident? How did you gain that confidence? And what they've articulated is that they feel more comfortable going into a full-time workplace setting because they've experienced a working culture before. They know what a relationship with a supervisor looks like. They've started to engage with things like performance management. So they have a confidence about themselves that they can operate and communicate in a working context. So this is our why. And parents, family members, I encourage you to share the why with your students and help them see the true value of a part-time job. Now, what you may really want to know is, how does my student actually find this job? This all sounds great. We're on board, right? We want our students to develop skills and be successful, but what do we do to actually get there? Well, there's some things that you and your student need to consider. One is, where do they want to work? Where are they going to be open to working? When we think about part-time employment on campus, any student is eligible to work. However, you can work on campus or you can work off campus. You can work both. You can have maybe 10 hours on campus and 15 hours or 10 hours off campus, whatever the student schedule looks like and whatever that need is, it aligns with their workplace values and their needs and their student experience. What I find most often are that students want to start their part-time search on campus for some of the natural benefits that we see associated to on-campus work. That includes a bit more flexibility, right? You're on campus, you're in an academic environment where your academics are prioritized, but also the convenience of being on campus. I will share with you all, if money is a necessity for your student to have a part-time job, which is understandable, it certainly was for me in my college experience. Know that that same group of students who reported through the Good Work campaign did report off-campus work brought in a bit higher hourly wage than what we saw on campus. Off campus, they were earning approximately $11.50 to $15 per hour, where it was slightly lower, closer to $9 per hour as an average on campus from that student reporting set. So that's something to keep in mind as well. What I encourage students to do are apply for both. Open up every maximum possibility you can because part-time jobs are competitive, especially on campus. But because that's typically what students are aiming for first, we're going to talk a little bit about on-campus employment specifically. As we think about on-campus employment, we're going to start with eligibility and the concept of a federal work-study role. Your student needs to know if they are work-study eligible. You may say, what in the world is work-study? There was actually a great article on the Parent and Family Hub that I'm sure we could share with you all, but I'm going to hit the highlights for you as it relates to what this means for your student. Work study is a status associated through your student's financial aid, their FAFSA. It's based on need and some other criteria that determines if they receive a work study award. If they have work study written into their financial aid award, it will have a monetary amount associated to it. However, the student has to find a job and work those hours to actually receive that money. Now, what's unique about work study is that money doesn't go back to their student account to cover tuition costs, etc. It is an hourly wage that they get to direct deposit through their on-campus work study role into their personal banking account. So it gives them a means to earn some money. It's a common misperception, actually, that work study jobs are guaranteed, though. And that's what you should know initially. They are not guaranteed. However, we certainly give preference to students who have that work study attribute associated to their financial aid. Because we know it's needs-based, we want to ensure your student's successful. So if we can connect them to offices or departments that are hosting work study students, then they can earn those funds that have been outlined on their financial aid award. Now, if your student's not work study, that's okay too. About half of our on-campus jobs in fall were work study, the other half were non-work studies. There's certainly possibility for both. But if your student has that work study assignment, they should communicate that to prospective employers because that will help them. Again, preference is typically given initially to those work study students. So that's something that you should know initially. You can be non-work study, still be eligible. If we have any international student families on the call, I would want to differentiate and make sure you understand that international students are not work study eligible by the nature of that being a federal program for domestic students. However, international students can still work on campus, and we work with the ISSS office to work through work authorization for students, which we'll talk a little bit more in a moment. So now that you know about eligibility, let's talk about goal alignment. If your student wants to go be a medical practitioner and go to the School of Medicine as their next step, as an example, post-graduation, they may be able to find a job in the UAB hospital. The UAB hospital actually is our number 1 employer for on-campus work. If your student knows that they want to work in the hospital, I would direct them directly to the UAB Hospital Careers website. If you go to UAB Hospital website, there's a careers tab. It's pretty easy to find, and let them apply for jobs directly through that site. Again, very common for our students to work at the hospital. Do know your student's going to need to be open to working roles that might require flexible hours. For example, a lot of our students that are working in the hospital don't have a traditional Monday through Friday 8 to 5 hourly role like they may in a campus role. But it's still considered campus and a great way for them to connect to work. Now, there's going to be many roles on campus, though, that don't have that direct goal alignment. And I'm here to normalize that, and I need your help normalizing that too. I'm going to tell you our top campus employers in terms of the quantity of students they post and a little bit about those roles, and encourage you to ask your student to consider those types of opportunities, especially if they're committed to really wanting to work on campus. We see those roles show up in places like facilities. That's going to be the Hill Student Center, as an example, our University Recreation Center, as well as UAB libraries. They hire high quantities of students to create the operational needs for those facilities. But what's cool about those roles are that your students not only get to serve in a space where they see other students and are engaging in large teams, which creates community for your student, but also there's a lot of leadership development in those roles and trainings and supports to help them grow and stretch themselves to gain those skills that we were talking about earlier. They also typically have different hours than a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 because those facilities are largely open beyond typical business hours. So that's a good benefit for your student too, to have some flexibility between classes to still get the maximum number of hours possible. Another great employment opportunity I would mention on campus is working with our campus dining. Campus dining has facilities all over campus, and so it's a great opportunity for your student to connect to a lot of different types of work, though in the dining realm. One really cool benefit of working for campus dining is they provide each student worker with one free meal swipe a day. So that can also support some of the financial need that you may have, as well as just ensuring your student has access to a good meal once a day at least, right? And there's other supports we can provide to your student, like the Blazer Kitchen, if there's any food with issue with food insecurity as well. And we are here to provide that support. But that's a really cool benefit for our students serving in the campus dining area. There's many other jobs across campus. In fact, last fall alone, there was 2,700 jobs, roughly nearly 2,800, that our students were working to support the operations of the institution. Here's what I'd tell you though. Of those 2,800, hundreds of students are typically applying for some of those roles. No less than the minimum ratio is really 18 applications per role. And we see those numbers really significantly spike at certain times of the year, with the fall being one of those. The students are looking for those opportunities. So encourage your student to be persistent if they're looking for those roles, and to not focus on goal alignment, focus more on just opportunity, because we know skill development is going to happen regardless. Now, where you should point them, I've mentioned the UAB Hospital Career Site, but for most other on-campus roles and off-campus community-facing part-time roles, I would encourage your student to visit Handshake. Now, I will say if you try to go to this website directly or use the QR code shared, it is not going to work for you because you have to authenticate or log in to access these resources. That is intentional. We want to reserve these opportunities for UAB students, but your student can log in and access these. So even if you're, taking a picture of this and sending the student the link to say log in, that would work. But no, you won't be able to access it directly. And bear with us with that. I wanted you to see an idea what that looks like. So I'm going to play this video again. This is a job posting board, essentially, amongst many other incredible tools right now for your students' part-time search. So this is where they can go look for those part-time jobs and actually apply through the system. This is great for them to connect easily to opportunity, to maximize the number of applications they're submitting, and to connect with those departments directly that they might not have had a direct connection to. Know that UAB presently does not require all on-campus jobs to be posted on Handshake, though many are there. It's important for your student to have conversations with faculty, with staff, with other students, to seek out those opportunities as well. Oftentimes, they're just due to relationships that happen across campus, that building of relationships. A job might be filled before the staff even has a chance to post it to Handshake, because they're connecting with other students within their existing networks or course structures or organizations, et cetera, or peers of student employees already hired. So I encourage your student to do both. Check out Handshake as the initial first stop, but then talk to their peers and seek out other opportunities through conversation and connection. As your students applying on Handshake, I would say a couple things. One, they can set up alerts as you see down here so that they get notifications each time a type of job based on their preferences is posted. They also can visit this QR code, or when they log in over here, when they go to jobs, they'll see an option to see collections. In fact, it's right here. There's a drop-down menu that goes to collections. When they do that, they can select on-campus jobs, and that will filter for them presently posted on-campus roles that they can apply for. Typically, if they can see it, that means they're eligible. So that cuts down on some questions about, hey, can I do this even though I'm not a student in anthropology? Can I still apply? We'll encourage your student to read the description, but minimally they're eligible if they can see the opportunity. Now, here's what is important. And I know that you're going to know this, but sometimes our students can help need a little extra help understanding timelines. As we all know, getting a job is not a quick process. Sometimes, if you're lucky and fortunate that you meet the right person at the right time and they need an immediate fix, that you will get hired quickly. Most often, though, those jobs are being posted for a period of time where students might catch it on the first week it's posted, but need to wait until the fourth week when they actually start reviewing resumes. We also know that, especially for an on-campus role, that the employees posting those jobs have other responsibilities. So they may be slower in filling that need or waiting till closer to the time for the start of the fall semester, for example. There's lots of variables that impact that hiring timeline. Encourage your student to do one thing though. They need to reach out at least once outside of the applicant system they use to apply. If they can connect to the department's website and find contact information, which is typically pretty easy and common to do, they can then email that person, call them, or visit their department once, bring their resume with them, and indicate that they've applied for the job and would like to have further conversation about their potential to be hired. What we see students do sometimes is do that, take advantage of it. And what that immediately does for the employer is sparks initiative, right? That's a skill that they're looking for. They've demonstrated that initiative. And I'll say for me as an employer of students, I am much more likely to go directly back to my desk, or if it was an email at my desk, pull up that student's application and spend longer looking at it. We know on average that when someone looks at a resume, they spend 6 to 8 seconds. So if your students reached out, I might spend 30 seconds to a minute looking at it at least, compared to that initial glance past to the next resume. So it's valuable for your student to draw attention to themselves in their way. Here's what we don't want students to do though, and I see happen far too often. Students are eager, they need work, they want to work, which is incredible, but they'll reach out to that department day after day after day, and it'll be 2 weeks straight that they've reached out to them every single day. And you and I know that that actually creates a whole other type of need from the supervisor's perspective. That might point to that student is going to need more support than that supervisor has time to give. And so encourage your student to have a balance, right? Reach out once, give it a week, give it even 2 weeks before you reach out one more time. But continue to search for other opportunities in the meantime. It's important to be persistent, but with balance. All right, now, family members, this one is certainly for you. I find most often that it is difficult, and I can understand why, for family members to trust their students with work authorization documentation. But if you've worked before, you know there's a federal I-9 requirement for your student to have work authorization to start their role. One of the most common mistakes I see for student employment is that a student is offered a job, so they do the hard work and get that resume reviewed, and someone hires them, they do the interview, all the things. The student does the hard work, but then they're given that job and they can't get the I-9 complete for 2 or 3 weeks because they've got to go back home and get this documentation. In the meantime, the employer can't wait, hire someone else, and the student starts over. What can you do to help your student be prepared? Federal I-9 requires original documentation for domestic students that would include a passport or a state issued ID and either a social security card or birth certificate. Okay, there's some other options. You can simply Google I-9 verification documentation and find the whole federal listed options your student can bring with them. These are traditionally the ones that are most often used. Again, if you're an international family, your student can access work authorization and they'll work with the ISSS office to do so. Domestic students have to bring the original documents with them in order to be eligible to work. So I encourage you to invest in a lockbox, invest in a sheet protector, something to where you feel comfortable giving these documents to your students so that it doesn't delay the employment process and they can actually begin their roles. And ultimately, we believe that these strategies are going to help your student connect to work. Once they're connected, though, like the role, the responsibility, I guess, doesn't end there. And this is really how the Career Center wants to support your student. We want to help them understand the value of this experience, the skill development of this experience. And regardless of the role, last week in orientation, I'll give you an example. A student told me he was the manager at Taco Bell. What an incredible opportunity to market yourself and to speak to future opportunity in terms of your work ethic, initiative, communication, problem solving. At that time of his life to already be a manager of a high speed dining facility, right? We want to help your students be trained on how to talk about that, how to talk about these part-time roles in a way that are of value to employers. So when we sit down in a interviews chair for the first time, they can speak with confidence about how this translates regardless of what industry role it is they're seeking. For your student to do that, though, we need your help encouraging them to treat this job like their dream job, to show up and to be reliable, to be open to feedback and have a growth mindset, and even seek feedback out to build every single relationship they can, because again, that can be future references and mentors and peers who are going to recommend them for future opportunities and ultimately to reflect. And that's an incredible way the Career Center can specifically support your student. Encourage your students once they land these jobs to, in 2, 3 months, schedule a career coaching conversation with the Career Center. I'll tell you how to do that here in a moment. When they come in, they could bring their resume, for example, or they could just come in to reflect. And what we would do is we would start helping them digest what's the skill attainment you have. How are you going to talk about that? And how are you articulating that verbally in written form on your resume to really make that job count for your future? So we hope to be a part of that reflection and growth that happens through their role, but they don't need to wait until they finish the role and are applying for that full-time opportunity or graduate school or professional school to recount that experience. They need to do it while it's fresh and to build that in as a regular component of their employment experiences. And ultimately, it becomes an employment exercise to reflect regularly, and that growth is significant through it. Outside of that specific suggestion, the Career Center can help in so many different ways. And I'm going to point to two specifically and then give you some examples of other ways we serve your students. First is networking and exploration. I'm excited to share that August 31st is our first, what we call Get Hired event. Get Hired is a monthly series that happens typically towards the end of the month, with the exception of November because of Thanksgiving, where your students can come in person in the Hill Student Center and connect to working opportunities through employers who are tabling there. And we have off-campus and on-campus employers tabling. Your students can log into Handshake to learn more about that event, but ultimately it's a casual setting where maybe they're grabbing Chick-fil-A or Panera or Main Bowl, going to eat their lunch, and then they have 30 minutes to spare before their next class and can actually go have some conversations. We anticipate that students will be hired on the spot for many roles, but even if your student isn't actively searching, to help them understand that every connection matters and to go to those tables, have conversations, to practice their elevator pitch, to get comfortable having those professional conversations, but ultimately walk away with a business card that they could then call back on when needed in the future. So Get Hired is going to be a great opportunity for your students. We also, as I mentioned, have that specialized career coaching. Your students have access to professional staff who provide career coaching Monday through Friday from 9 to 4 p.m. They can request an appointment on Handshake where your student can go in and pick a time that specifically works for them. That initial appointment is a 30-minute conversation and it's a one-time commitment. So we're not asking them to, commit to coming back every 2 weeks. Though we do believe that when your student engages with our team, that they're going to want to come back and see us as a partner in their experience. Encourage your student to take advantage of this. Yes, we can support them with strategy around finding a part-time job. There's a number of other ways we can support their career interest and development. That may start if you have a first-year student with just exploring what types of careers are associated to a specific major. It can also be looking at job market data to understand what could I expect to earn if I did want to pursue this field. What are actual UAB graduates earning that are currently in that field? What does that trajectory look like? So those are the types of things we have access to that we can support them in through conversation. We also want to be a resource, though, for your students as they're developing applicant materials, as they're preparing to sit down in interview chairs, by having mock interviews and conversations about how they answer questions and respond to sell the best versions of themselves, amongst many, many other things. So your student doesn't really have to know exactly what they need when they come in for career coaching. We want to get to know your student, understand that they have differing needs, and us help them determine what the next steps are. Maybe that next step is just connecting to experiences to be a good candidate. And we can help talk with them and understand what their goals are, what their interests are, and point them in the right directions. There's many other ways the Career Center supports your student. You see some of those listed here. One of my favorite is, of course, professional networking. Anything from alumni connections through events and our Next Step Alumni Network to helping them, again, prepare for an interview, but perhaps by being confident and feeling confident even in their professional attire. For example, we have a career closet on our campus, which is gently worn clothes that we receive through donations from incredible faculty, staff, community members, and alumni. That those clothing are provided to students free of cost. They can visit as many times as they want to, and they get to keep the clothes. So we see our students use that for interviews for things like part-time roles. We also see them request that for research conferences or when their faculty member says, hey, dress in business attire for this presentation. They get to come and use those clothes so they can feel their best. And it really helps create access to that confidence that we know that you need to feel ready for those career opportunities. Family members, if you have clothes that you want to donate that are professional attire, we plan to work with our Parent and Family Services office to do a clothing drive around Fall Family Weekend so that you can bring those clothes and our students can benefit from them instead of giving them away. Save them for a UAB blazer. Blazers and blazers, pun intended there. We also have a cool photo booth, which is something fun that you don't typically think about as you think about career engagement. We want our students to have an online presence, specifically on LinkedIn. We see that tool as being where recruiting lives, where virtual networking lives in a professional space. And we want your student, even if they're in their first year, to start building their LinkedIn profile. That's actually something they could come in for career coaching conversation about, and let's work with them to kind of piece that together and identify ways that they can enhance their LinkedIn profile. They can go visit our photo booth and take a free professional headshot. It's a real glow up. They can use it as many times as they want to. All that we encourage your student to do is to avoid putting that on their resume. A picture doesn't go on your resume. So if you've seen your student's resume, you've seen a picture on it, or if it's very colorful, go ahead and help us address that with them or send them to the Career Center so we could talk about it together with your student. But all of these things and many, many more are ways we exist to serve your student. If you think about the Career Center, what I want you to remember is that we are a partner with you and for you for your student to be successful. And we're going to connect them to experiences, help them feel confident and prepared for opportunities, and build their social capital through networking and connection to career and industry roles. And that's who we are. And we hope to be able to do all those things with your student to best support them to the max extent possible. That's what I have prepared for you today in terms of part-time jobs and who the Career Center is. I hope to get to know you, and I believe we have enough time left that Carmen may open it up for questions. So I'm going to close my screen here, but happy to answer any questions you may have.
No, this is amazing information. Thank you, Dr. Contant, for all this information. And I'm really excited about the part you talked about the transferable skills and the example you gave of the student who works at Taco Bell and how that is giving that student so many skills that he's building for his future career. So the Career Center is there to help students not just understand how that relation between the current job is, but also to find current jobs. You mentioned work study, and so I am going to share that article that you referred to from the Family Hub. And so families, if you want to go back and look at the article about work study that's on the Family Hub, there's the link. And so it's a very interesting article, and it really explains in a very easy to understand manner. It's just it helped me understand work study and how it operates. And so please go back and refer to that as well. Can you mention again the date for the Career Exploration Fair? I believe it was August 31st, if I'm not mistaken.
August 31st from 11 to 1:30 p.m. in the Hill Student Center on the first floor. And I'm also, as we're talking, gonna drop in a link for Handshake so that you can share that with your student as well to explore.
Yes, and as time goes on, remember on the calendar on the Family Hub, you can find all of these events and also the links that will take. Maybe you can't register, but you can guide your student and remind them to go ahead and register. And we will post information about the upcoming events. The Career Closet is another aspect I also wanted to touch upon because as Dr. Kotant mentioned, we are going to do a little drive. So if you come to Family Weekend and you want to bring some of your clothes to donate, I know that we will appreciate those, and students will really appreciate those when it comes time to go to an interview. And so bring them with you, and we will get them to the right place. So Again, if you have any questions on looking sideways, to look on Facebook. And thank you everybody who's joining us here on Zoom and via Facebook. So if you have any questions at this time, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section. And while we wait for questions, do you have any last minute tips? I like the part that you said, if you see a picture on the resume, remind your student the picture doesn't go there. Are there any key points that you want students to remember when they're creating a resume, or things that are important?
Sure. Formatting is half the battle. I mentioned to you all that on average, an individual spends about 6 to 8 seconds looking at a resume. A common question I get for any of you that have first year students joining us at UAB is, what can I include from my high school experience as I'm trying to get UAB or college specific experiences? What I encourage you to share with your student is it's okay for them to still have high school experience. We really give them kind of a free window until the end of their first semester to start moving some of that high school experience off and replacing it with college experience. Now, what that means though is you need to encourage your student from the beginning of the fall semester to start getting involved. And involvement can come in different pathways, whether it's part-time jobs, whether it's joining a student organization, whether it's volunteering in your community, taking a service learning class. There's a lot of different pathways there, but it is important they do that from day one. And our data actually shows that students who get involved early are going to be more satisfied at UAB and actually have a higher GPA too. So that's a fun side note. But let your students know that it's okay that high school experience is there, at least for the first semester. Some other things that I would mention as you think about applicant materials is your resume is just one tool. And I find that that's where students really hyper focus, is they just want their resume to look perfect and think that that's going to get them a job. And while yes, so you want to have a good resume to get past the application, the real challenge is when you sit down for an interview and letting your students know that we're here to support them with interview preparation and anything from the small talk that happens when you walk in the door and are talking to whoever you're interviewing with, to acing a behavioral question, which is typically something like, tell me about a time when you worked in a team or had a difficult encounter with a difficult person, or you've all had those probably questions before that you're familiar with. They're tough to answer, but there's strategy around answering it. And we can help your student prepare proactively for those questions instead of waiting until the day before the interview to schedule a mock interview. Encourage them to do that interview preparation throughout their UAB experience. So when the time comes for those opportunities that they're not going to want to miss out on, and we know that they'll get past that interview phase because they're going to get a great looking resume here at UAB. We'll support them through that, that they're also interview ready. I just think that that's something our students sometimes forget about and feel comfortable having casual conversation right with their peers and think that that's going to translate to an employer setting. But we know that that looks a little bit different, and we want to go alongside them in preparation for that.
I think one aspect that was key that you mentioned is getting involved and participating in organizations. So maybe the getting a job is not a priority for them right now, or because of the class load, it's not something that they're willing to do, but getting involved in an organization, how those skills can transfer. So if they have any questions about how the skills that they're gaining from being part of an organization will transfer into a potential job opportunity later, that's also something the Career Center is there for.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just add to that, Carmen. Working is not for everyone, though I think it's an incredible thing to add to your portfolio that you have worked part-time. It demos the professional world. We think that that can be done in conjunction with or as a standalone, but the same is true about joining a student organization. One of the most common things I hear parents or family members express during kind of the orientation and onboarding process for a student is, I don't want them to get involved in too much too early. What I have found with more than 15 years of experience in this field are that students who get involved early, whether that is through a part-time job or student organizations or both, are actually going to have better time management, because what they're going to do is build their schedule where it requires them to schedule so that they're going to be mindful of their time and how to fill gaps, but they're also going to be surrounded by peers who are doing the same things and holding them accountable. And then what it leverages for them is not only that original kind of accountability and sense of belonging it creates, but longer term, it's going to help them foster leadership, which is again something we know that employers are looking for in our candidates post graduation. And leadership again can come by way of part time work, involvement, or both. So things to consider as you're kind of deciding with your student what they need to take on in their next semester.
Great point. Great valid point. And I do think we have something related to AI and AI reading application letters or interest letters. And so what do you recommend for students as they're building their letters and their resume?
Great question. AI is on everybody's mind, right? It has become just the talking point, and that is not any different in the career world, right? I would say you might have concerns that AI is going to replace your students' jobs one day. That's a common question I'm getting from parents, so I'll go ahead and address that. If I had the magic wand, I would tell you the answer. Here's what I think and how we're trying to prepare students for that. AI is not going away. I do not believe it will, this is my personal professional opinion, it will fully replace our students' entry level roles. I do think, though, our students are going to have to be able to utilize it efficiently to maximize those roles. And so it's going to still require the human element, but you're going to have to be able to integrate that into your work. So encouraging your student to use it is a good place to start. However, when you think about applicant materials, which was Carmen's point, please tell your student not to go to a open AI source like Copilot or ChatGPT to create their resume. They need to start from a blank Word document. They similarly don't use Canva or other design softwares out there. They need to have a black and white resume, a white page with only black ink, and start from scratch. And that way they can actually defend every bullet point that's on that resume when they're asked about it in an interview. A resume is not a place for icons, for graphics, for pictures, for colors. That's just not necessary. And that's also because we see applicant tracking systems be tools utilized, especially for larger opportunities. When your student's looking to internship opportunities, for example, applicant tracking systems may be the first point of contact their resume has with not a human, but artificial intelligence. And so some of those things, colors, lines, icons, not using language that is in alignment with the job description, can break down their alignment with the role and get them to be pushed out of that pool of considered experienced or qualified candidates. So the Christianer is here to help with all those things. Your student don't have to figure out that alone, but at a baseline, I would let them know they need to learn how to use AI, but use it ethically and responsibly, and it is not responsible to use it to build your resume from scratch.
That is a great point because AI is everywhere, so we learn to live with it. So I don't see any questions coming through right now, but just I think as a reminder, the UAB Career Center is there for your students. It's never too early. So your student may just be a freshman coming in. It's never too early to visit, to start understanding the whole process and getting everything ready. So when the time comes and graduation comes, it's not a last minute, oh, I have to find a job. It's been a building process. It's been all of a process of learning about themselves, discovering their interests, discovering connections, networking. So I do encourage everybody to remind their students about the Career Center. And definitely Dr. Cotant and her staff are amazing and they're there for students. So as we finish, I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. Remind you of our webinars on Thursdays, student counseling services and wellness promotion. And then we do have a few more first generation, next week. And we will send those reminders. So please follow us on Facebook and on Instagram and check out and make sure you're registered on the Family Hub and share that with others. And so thank you, Dr. Cotant, for being here with us today. And thank you, families, and have a great rest of your day.